All right, here we go. We're going to talk about the immune system now that we know about all of the different players. And in this video, I'm going to cover the second line of defense. So remember that the first line of defense were the physical and chemical barriers and those genetic barriers. Now we're going to be talking about immunology. And the second line of defense has 4 different parts. There's inflammation, phagocytosis, interferon, and the complement system. So let's start by talking about inflammation. So inflammation is when you react to the invasion of some sort of organism. This can be a cut or a wound that opens up. It can be a bacteria coming into the body. There's all sorts of different things that are going to stimulate an inflammatory response. The symptoms of inflammatory response are typically like redness, warmth to the touch, swelling, pain, and eventually there can be a loss of function if there's too much damage done to the site wherever the injury has occurred, right? So you poke your finger with something, you have some sort of injury. Now you're underneath the surface of your skin, maybe an invading pathogen has gotten past that first line of defense, that physical barrier, right? And an infection starts to develop at that site. We're going to talk about all of the different things that happen with the cells there that are actually going to cause a lot of those symptoms that you feel. Remember, we've discussed before that a lot of times the signs and symptoms of infection have nothing to do with what the microbe is actually doing within the body. It's not like they're producing toxins or doing damage to cells necessarily. A majority of the signs and symptoms that you feel initially from an infection are because of your immune response, right? Which is why a lot of the signs and symptoms for lots of different types of infections are the same. All right, so what is inflammation? Inflammation is this process by which we attract immune cells to the site of this infection or the site of where these invading organisms have gotten in. We identify them as foreign. We start to clear away any harmful substances, destroy any microbes that are there, try and prevent the microbes from being able to leave the site of infection because we don't want them traveling around the body, and eventually engaging in this battle where we kill off those pathogens and then we clean up all of the debris and repair any tissue damage that may have been done because of that infection. So here's just another example. We can see somebody steps on a nail and that nail is covered with bacteria, right? So that bacteria now has gotten past that first line of defense and is right here, like in these inner tissues, adjacent to the blood vessels, right? So there are microbes that are here next to your blood vessels. So what will happen is immediately you're going to have a vasoconstriction, right? Your blood vessels are going to constrict until there's some clotting, right? We don't want to bleed out, right? We're trying to minimize blood, right? But then those immune cells, right, those neutrophils, if you watch the Life of a Cell video, they're moving around through the blood vessels and we want to attract them to the site of the infection so they can come to help. So we want to then vasodilate. We're going to open up your blood vessels so that the neutrophils come to the site, right? And they are attracted to the site because there's chemical stimulants being released by cells where the infection is happening that are triggering to the endothelial wall of the blood vessel saying, hey, if you roll past here, neutrophils, we need you to flatten out and move out and start to, fight this infection. Right? We start to see fluids and pus formation at the site, and then, a lot of chemical signaling bringing immune cells to wherever the infection is. They start to destroy, fight off all the pathogens, kill them, right? And then eventually repair and, fix the issues, right? So the vascular changes that happen are a result of chemical signaling. So cytokines and chemokines are chemical signalers that are pretty much produced by any kind of cell that's responding to an invading pathogen to sort of signal other cells. There's lots of cross communication and chemical signaling that's happening between all these cellular players when we're fighting an infection. So the cytokines are released by the blood cells and the tissue cells, right, all at the site of where the infection is. The endothelial cells, the wall of the blood vessel, right, are going to respond or be signaled by these cytokines. The chemokines, they are going to be affecting the white blood cells, so signaling and recruiting the white blood cells to come to the site of the infection. Right? There's a lot of things that sort of happen after that, that are, you know, the movement of fluids, the formation of pus, the causing of a fever, that are going to, be a result of this inflammatory response. So remember, the overarching idea is to trap the bacteria into one location, right? Or the invading organism or microbe into one location so it can't get out, and then, you know, pull in as many immune cells as possible, fight off, kill them off, clean off the debris, and then repair any tissue damage. All right, so the bringing in of fluid is known as edema, right? So we're accumulating fluid, we're accumulating pus, right? We're bringing in white blood cells so that we can, you know, trap the infection where it's at, the invading pathogen where it's at, and we can bring in those white blood cells to start phagocytizing. The process of moving white blood cells from the blood vessels into the site of infection is called diapetesis. And so this is a chemotactic response, right? So we talked about chemotaxis being how flagella cause bacteria to respond to a chemical stimulant and move in a certain location. Well, we can still use that word chemotaxis as it pertains to white blood cells. So there's chemical signalers, chemokines, cytokines that are being produced. The white blood cells chemotactically respond, and they move through and migrate in between the blood vessel wall to the site of the infection. Right? So some of the things that are good about like bringing in all of these fluids plus pus and cells, right? We want to dilute if there's any toxic substances that are being produced by the bacteria. We create like a little sticky trap to prevent the spread of those bacteria around the body. And then they're all stuck in one place, so phagocytosis can happen. Neutrophils are phagocytizers. We can get macrophages in and start cleaning up the infection. These images kind of show you that chemotactic response by the neutrophils. So here's your blood vessel wall. Those neutrophils are rolling down the blood vessel wall. Over here is where there's a site of an infection, and there's a chemical gradient. Those are chemokines and cytokines that start to communicate with the endothelial lining, and they trigger those neutrophils to roll over themselves, flatten out, and squeeze in between the blood vessel wall. And we see them squeezing through here in the electron micrograph here on the bottom. So if you have not watched that Life of the Cell video, it's really awesome. Watch it and you can kind of see that happening, demonstrating that process of diapetesis. All right, so the late stages of inflammation, sorry, is my phone dinging? The late stages of inflammation are going to be phagocytosis, so macrophages, neutrophils are engulfing the invading pathogens, destroying them. B cells and T cells are going to get in the fight. So right at the site of the infection, there's going to be some signaling that's going to happen up through the lymphatic vessels to your lymph nodes where the B cells and the T cells are, so that antibodies can be produced by the B cells and get in on the fight, and T cells can come and help to kill intruding bacteria. Again, we'll talk more about that next week when we get to that specific line, right? But it's sort of this crossover between inflammation and, our specific line of defense later. and then eventually we repair the tissues. Now, some other things that are happening adjacent to inflammation is fever, right? So fever is when your body temperature is elevated, and sometimes this can be stimulated exogenously or endogenously, right? It can be stimulated by something called a pyrogen. Is just something that stimulates an increase in your body temperature. If it's exogenous, it means that something from the outside world is stimulating a fever, right? It could be a toxin produced by a bacteria. Endogenous is when your own body stimulates the fever in order to eliminate the bacteria. Okay, so remember, there's bacteria can be very sensitive to temperature, and the function of enzymes and proteins in a bacteria can be very sensitive to temperature. So increasing your body temperature a little bit might inhibit the function of a bacteria, while, you know, our multicellular body can handle that increase in temperature. When it gets to be too high, that's when fever can be potentially dangerous to our cells as well. The increase in your body temperature is done in a couple different ways. It increases the muscle production, or the heat production by your muscles. So when you're shivering, right, that is actually producing heat. But it also is going to cause a vasoconstriction, so pulls your blood vessels away from, you know, the outside of your body to prevent heat loss, right? So that's what allows your temperature to go up. So benefits of fever, remember, temperature sensitive organisms, we can reduce the availability of cofactors, right? Iron for bacteria and their function for their enzymes. You can actually denature enzymes. And also another benefit is just by making a little bit warmer, it stimulates our immune system, increases our own metabolism, makes our physiological processes go a little bit faster, right? Which are all good things. Where fever becomes a problem is when it gets too high, and all of those things that we're doing to the bacteria because they're temperature sensitive and affecting their enzymes, right, then affects our own cells. All right, I'm running out of time in this video. I only got 15 minutes total, so I'm going to cut it off there, and we'll look at the last 3 parts of the second line of defense in the next video.